it's such a built-in habit into our wiring to sort of see the futures going on extensively. And from very early on, when I grow up, I'm going to do this. And sort of retraining the brain to say, you haven't got forever. You're not going to be able to read all those books. You're not going to be able to travel to all those countries. And what is happening to me is that I'm managing to care less about those things.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fairweather and welcome to The Third Act, brought to you by Auriens, the gold standard in later living. I'm thrilled to introduce as my guest this week, for a second time, Dame Harriet Walter, award-winning actor and recent author of the enjoyable and witty She Speaks, a rewriting of Shakespearean verse from a female point of view. Walter, of course, has enjoyed huge acclaim as a theatre actor, but became a household name more recently for a screen career with hits such as Killing Eve and Succession. We get together at Auriens to discuss the sweet spots and perils of finding fame in later life, marriage and maturity, and what it's like to get into your stride in your third act. Harriet, it's wonderful to see you again. I think you were one of the first people I interviewed on The Third Act nearly 4 years ago, and here you are, back again. It's really great to see you.
Thanks. That kicked me off going to the gym here, I remember.
Yes, well, you must come back. They do some great health diagnosis on their machines.
Oh, that would be good.
The special guys.
That would be good.
You must come back. Well, so in this period of time, you've done quite a lot of things. I think the last time we spoke, you had gone from being this person who was incredibly respected on stage and in the world of Shakespearean acting, and you've done so many things, television work, but you really had come up a notch, hadn't you, because you've become a household name with Succession and Killing Eve. Somehow the name Harriet Walter became known to many more people.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did experience that, and I still experience it on a pretty much daily basis. And it's a very odd thing being a bit more known.
Do you like it?
Gosh, do I like it? I do now, because the things I didn't like about it to do with, oh God, I haven't got any makeup on and I'm just shuffling off to the newsagent round the corner and I don't want people to come up to me and say, I know you. That I don't mind so much now. I just say, look, I haven't got any makeup on. Too bad, So that I've just relaxed on that level. And I've spent a long time doing what I love doing, and getting recognition beyond my peer group was not an aim, because actually if you have recognition within your peer group, you carry on getting interesting offers of work, which is sort of the way I've ticked along all these years. But there was probably a lurking thing at some point when the glass ceiling was just banging me on the head, when I couldn't get into a certain bracket of work because I wasn't a name. And so much of the more commercial stuff and the bigger TV and the films and the things that require people to invest a lot of money in producing, I was not ever going to get a look in. And that was frustrating. And there are times when I go, I wish I'd had the fame I've got now when I was 35 or 40. But c'est la vie. You're lucky to get it at all. And, I'm much more relaxed about it and say that's the way my life turned out, and isn't it great that I've done the job that I like to do?
Why do you think it is, though? Why do you think this late life, it's not like it's late life flourishing, because you were always an actor in work doing incredibly well, but what do you think resonated? What was it, just that the roles became available that were perfect for you?
I think it's very accidental, the interweaving of the zeitgeist, the real world out there, and your individual path. It's quite it's unpredictable. We try to explain it, but it's actually inexplicable. Usually it's inexplicable. Some people, it's very clear that they've done something extraordinary later in life. But as you say, I don't think I'm a better actor now than I was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But the dimension of my career that depends on a lot of people recognizing you and wanting to see more of you, that just happened because the things I was involved in got so huge. So, I could have had a cough and a spit in Succession. I'd be more recognised than all the Shakespeare plays I've ever done.
Maybe there is a renewed or a new kind of interest in women over 25.
I think so.
You know, that age is less of a taboo. Aging is less of a taboo. People are thinking about their immortality, and just it's not such a terrible, shuffled off into cupboards anymore.
Yes, I think people are seeing examples of, their favourite TV presenter or author or actor or writer carrying on doing it into their 80s or whatever.
Mm. Well, I suppose men always did carry on. I mean, they were never really cold-shouldered.
That's true.
Maybe it's more... I just noticed that in lockdown, since lockdown, there has been more of a thing about middle-aged women and above in the media doing yoga, standing on their heads.
Yes.
And looking beautiful without having facelifts.
It's very positive but it runs alongside that thing when we had the notion of superwoman who could do everything and be a brilliant mother, brilliant wife, brilliant cook, and have a career. And that sort of, it had a double edge to it, because on the one hand it was very encouraging and said anything is possible and you could pursue this role model, and on the other side of the sword was like, you're a bit of an inadequate because you haven't accomplished all these things and you're not very good at all of them. So the idea of sort of carrying on being energetic into your 60s and 70s and 80s, it's a privilege rather than an absolute, it's going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, you're at fault. So you don't really want that to come across, but you do want people it's to do with their self-image as well. I remember my mother at sort of around about 60 saying, I really have lost my looks now. And she patently hadn't, but, she was comparing herself with when she was much younger, and she was also sticking to the public image of what people thought was good looks. And she'd sort of ingested that and was spouting it out again. And I thought, it stayed with me that she'd actually got to a point, like she said at 40, I'm never going to ride again, I don't think, because she used to love riding horses. And you thought, you're 40, come on. And looking back on it, I think it's to do with our perception. And the more that we expand people's perception of what you could be at 60, 70, 80, the more they've got that aspiration and the more self-fulfilling it might be.
That's what you do all the time in your life. You bust open straitjackets. You're constantly defying categorization and your gender-busting roles that you do. You've been in Bath, haven't you? Playing
yes, a gender-fluid Jake, yes.
How did that go?
I loved it. It was absolutely great.
Ray Fiennes director, yeah?
Yes. I felt very free because it's very freeing not having to be a very female character, because I think we're all a bit gender fluid deep down, in the sense of the deepest core of us. I mean, the deep core of me I don't think it has a gender, really. I've lived my life as a woman, and so I have experience of that, and I've reflected that back, and I've felt that. So I know what that is, and I feel pretty comfortable being defined as a woman. But I also feel it's really incomplete as a description of how I experience the world and who I am. So the things that I played Prospero about 10 years ago as a sort of non-gendered person, really. I mean, we didn't say that, but that's how it felt. And then I played Jake in the summer, and that they did use the preposition they occasionally in the script, because in all those cases, what you prove by doing that is that it's immaterial to the role what your gender is. Jake is a philosopher and a melancholic. He's actually a bit bipolar, I think. And I'm using he because that's who Shakespeare wrote. But if you inhabit that role as a female, you drop your femaleness and just become this person who sees the world the way they see that.
I wonder if Shakespeare wouldn't have... Well, he probably didn't really think about what women were thinking too much then, did he?
That's the kind of nitty-gritty, really. There's this sort of frustration with Shakespeare because he sort of absolutely has this almost limitless understanding of human beings. But in his storytelling, which is the main thrust of a play, what's the story? The women don't have nearly as much agency, but they rarely have any agency in lots of ways, and you feel, well, you've written so beautifully about them and for them. You must like them, and it's just that he's in a world where they don't. They didn't even get on stage to act his plays. He might have known them very well intimately and known lots of women, but it wasn't his brief, in a way, even to himself, to centre on that or focus on that in a play.
Is that why you wrote this book, She Speaks? Because it was so frustrating to you that you wanted to redeem the Shakespearean women for us.
I think that's right in a way, because I suppose as I described it, he holds the mirror up to nature, and I just wanted to twist the mirror round so it looked at another corner that he'd slightly left out, really. I mean...
It's brilliant. It is so brilliant. Did it take you long?
Surprisingly not too long. I mean, it took many months, but because it's broken up into 30 individual pieces, I could write a piece in a weekend, then go off and do a play and come back and do another piece. Do you know what I mean? So, whereas if I was having to write a novel, I'd have to lock myself away for 3 months and not speak to anybody,
But it's genius in many ways. It's so clever because, one, it's a way into your life and what you were doing at a certain time and what roles you were playing and what you brought to different Shakespearean parts you were playing. So that's interesting. Then, obviously, you're inhabiting the characters, the female characters in Shakespeare that we wish we knew more about. And I love what you say about, actually talking on the subject as we have been, about ageism. You make a comment about the witches and how anyone over childbearing age would have been considered a witch, or a single woman would have been considered a witch.
Yes, I mean, it was the singleness, I think, the childlessness, and sort of living on your own and being a bit eccentric and a bit ostracised. And then if anything went wrong, the crop that year was bad or somebody's pig died, it would be because of...
Can you imagine?
Well, we do that now. We scapegoat people. But in those days, it was the old lady. There's a wonderful play called The Witch of Edmonton, written by Decker, Ford and Rowley in the early 17th century. And it's really about that. And she has a familiar who's a dog. And, all the village goes into chaos because they blame her, and she's obviously just a victim. It's quite a big-hearted play. And, it's very clear what happens. And then I in my life, I've played and seen in The Crucible, the Arthur Miller play, which is set in the Salem witch trials in the 17th century, but actually he was writing about McCarthyism, because the same mechanism is at stake. And it's all this thing about scapegoating people and dividing people into different groups that we then don't talk to, we don't meet, and therefore we don't understand.
I guess that's rife at the moment.
And that's what's going on now. I mean, I think people are talking to much more than in my youth. Goodness, in my youth, you didn't dare talk to somebody who was of a different age group. I sort of look at the young women who come up to me and say, "Hi, Harriet, blah, blah, let's go for lunch." And I go, I would never have dared do that to...
Round your kitchen table, round your parents' glamorous dining room table, surely you would have done.
Didn't talk to many old people.
No.
My grandmother was quite a force of nature, but she was really the only old woman I knew. And then I remember working with Peggy Ashcroft in the theatre when I was in my early 30s, and she was my age now. And she asked me out to lunch when we were on tour, and I went, "Oh my God, what do I wear? What do I wear?" And sort of practically washing my white gloves and ironing them, and then we went out to lunch and had a chat, and it was fine, but I didn't get pally. And looking back on that, I've always remembered that. I thought, why on earth would she want to take me out to lunch? And I thought, she's on tour, she's alone, we're playing in the same place, she likes me, and she wants to have lunch with me. But it didn't occur to me then.
No.
And I very much regret that I had all those inhibitions about talking to people of different age group. Now, that I think has hugely improved.
But it has. But as an actor, must be one of the loveliest things about being an actor is this sort of multi-generational, ready-made family that you've got.
Absolutely,
film set. Yeah.
That's exactly one of the greatest things.
Yeah. I was just reading a book about I can't remember the name of the guy, but only 100 years ago in the Arctic, or rather in Greenland, if you were a woman over childbearing age, that's why they breastfed their children into their 30s, by the way, you were literally put on a mountain to die.
Wow, that's brutal.
It's brutal. And that's really not that long ago.
But if you think that for many millennia, I don't know what it was like before recorded history, but women their role has been to give birth and rear children and feed people. Mm. And if you are no longer able to do any of that, then a wild dog in a pack, you're sent out to die or look after yourself. I can see the logic. It's a terrible logic if that's the way you see the world and that's what our function is. And then the sort of wise old lady thing, so maybe they cast themselves as indispensable because they knew medicinal potions and they had lots of knowledge locked up in their brains that people needed, and that made themselves necessary in the community, or they could look after the children when the mother was weak or giving birth to another child, so they became medicine women as well, and they were in charge of the health of the group. And if anything went wrong and someone died and your remedy hadn't worked, you became very, very blamed.
Absolutely. I just wonder whether, the youth-obsessed society that we've had has now become a sort of longevity-obsessed society. The billionaires are all looking for cures for eternal life. And I think as societies, we've sort of, I don't know, we haven't come to terms with the idea of mortality, have we?
No, and it's impossible to understand. I've decided, having been through some bereavements and sort of 20 years ago, I'm still trying to process them. And I said to myself not so long ago, you can't process death. It's impossible to imagine or process. We're sentient beings living here and now. We cannot conceive of not being. And so don't even try. Don't say, oh, well, within time I'll understand death and I'll accommodate it. I don't think you can. I think you just have to sort of know that it's going to happen. I'm not being facetious. I just think sometimes we get it wrong trying to understand it. But I also think that what you're talking about, this sort of obsession with avoiding it altogether, reversing the age process, and somehow life of itself is not, there's quality versus quantity.
There's a good way to die as well as a good way to live. Dying with dignity, etc. I think the idea of endings, in this wonderful book, you talk about it being quite moving. When you're playing Prospero, not as a man or a woman, but the idea that Prospero is Shakespeare giving up the baton, really, isn't he? He's passing it on. He's putting down his pen and he's going to Stratford. He's sort of going into retirement. Is that right?
Yeah, it's multi-layered because on one level it's this magician who's controlled his environment for all these years, and he's magicked his enemies onto the island, and he wants to take revenge on them. And the big message for me was forgiveness, and how you for your own soul and your own good, forgiving is a great thing, and it just takes a whole weight off your shoulders. You're not eaten up with anger all the time. Your enemies, they're put through it a bit and they realise they've done something awful and they say they're sorry. But, the main thing about forgiveness is it's for you. Forgiveness is for you. The giver of forgiveness is the person who really benefits most, I think. Yeah. And it was incredible sort of playing this angry, tortured person who'd been angry for 20 years and then is relieved of it. And so it involves, I don't have a private story about forgiveness myself, but the giving up, the sort of letting things go, which is one of the things that's happened in the last 4 years. I think I've become better at slowly giving certain things up.
Giving your resentments up or giving stuff up?
No, giving stuff up, giving on the most banal level, clearing out your house and giving stuff away and saying, look, be honest, you're never going to read that book. By habit, we look forward. That's what we do. We lie in bed and we think, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do next year? We look forward and plan. And it's sort of retraining the brain to say, you haven't got forever. You're not going to be able to read all those books. You're not going to be able to travel to all those countries.
You're not going to be able to have a puppy.
You're not going to have a puppy. You're probably not going to, you're certainly not going to have any children, in my case. And what is happening to me is that I'm managing to care less about those things. So you want that to happen because you want to ease up a bit. But at the same time, you want to keep going. You want to keep doing everything you want to do. So it's juggling those opposites of sort of trying to, not go gently, but also being a bit more philosophical about what you narrowing your priorities down. And the old cliche, trying to keep as healthy as possible because, that is so
and how do you
dominant now. That's the top priority now.
And in your case, what is that?
Well,
keeping as healthy.
I'm not as brilliant as I should be, but I do Pilates once a week if I can, and I walk everywhere and walk for 10 to 15 minutes every morning. I have a brisk walk before breakfast, whatever the weather. And
do you stand on one leg when you're brushing your teeth?
I don't stand on one leg when I'm brushing my teeth, but I do stand on one leg in my Pilates class. And I try to, I don't eat massively, drink massively, or smoke.
Did you go to bed early?
Nope.
You're a late nighter?
Hopeless at going to bed early.
Oh.
It's very rarely that I go to bed before 1.
Really? That's great. That's interesting. And so what time do you wake up in the morning?
I need about 7 hours.
Yeah, me too.
7.5 hours. So, and then I suppose I regularly set my alarm for 2 hours before my first appointment that day. That gives me an hour to chill and hang out and go for a walk and do the crossword and have breakfast, and an hour to get there.
So you do a crossword, and I know you're a pianist. That keeps your brain... That's meant to be very good for warding off...
Definitely. Who knows? I've got a sort of... I love crosswords and games like that, but I just find that even that, words are slipping away. I'll get them back in 5 minutes, but they'll go. It's my best friend's husband's name will suddenly go. It's not facts. It's just, it's very, very odd, this sort of blank that happens with names.
Does that happen on stage? Still?
So far, not.
Let's touch wood. Let's touch wood.
No, it's not even sort of, I don't know why it is with names. And I know that it's a feature of lots of people. They all say, oh, me too, me too. So I know that it's not odd, but it's unnerving. And you suddenly can't think of the simplest name. And I used to be, it wasn't brilliant, but I used to sort of watch quiz games on or University Challenge, and I'd be chipping it, and now I don't even bother because I know I'd get the answer about 10 minutes late.
But I guess there has to be a slowing up, doesn't there? Because none of us would want to shuffle off this mortal coil if we didn't slow up a bit. We'd want to be clinging on forever.
That's it.
A wonderful world, isn't it?
That's it. I mean, that would be the wished for thing, that you sort of gently wind down. Unfortunately, I'm also at that age when quite a few people are being taken away at a moment when they're still functioning quite well, but disease takes over, and so you're very aware of that as well. What can you say?
I don't know whether you've ever read Jeff Dyer's Last Days of Roger Federer.
I haven't.
It's really good because it's about when is the right time to call it a day? When do you decide that actually you're just rehashing stuff? When do you decide you don't want to be a has-been, and when do you decide to retire? And I think everyone who gets to a certain age feels that. I mean, my husband, Don McCullen's constantly saying, I'm so bored of talking about myself, being made to go on stage and talk about my life. I just don't want to keep going over. I want to draw a line under it now.
Yes, I understand that feeling very much. I certainly do. And it's a sort of two-way traffic, isn't it? Because partly it's habit. I think we sort of, if you've always done a certain job, you can't imagine yourself not doing that job, and you kind of frame your whole day in the way that you've always framed your day. Absolutely. And it's very hard to step out of that.
Like breathing, isn't it?
Yes.
Being a writer or being an actor, whatever.
It's like moving house, I suppose, when you think, I can't imagine ever living anywhere else, and then something in life makes you downsize or upsize or move to another country or something, and you take all your belongings with you. So when you set up the new house, it's still part of you, and you haven't really escaped. But I do see myself writing more. I think that's a little bit of my horizon. Partly, it's not yet a question of energy. I have plenty of energy for acting, but it's more to do with, of necessity, you're trapped in the roles that people see you in. And that's the sort of vicious circle of acting. You might feel like a young sprite, but you don't look like a young sprite, so you're not going to be playing one. And a lot of the parts I get offered, they're either dying or they've got Alzheimer's or something. I don't want to do that. Thank you very much. So I'd rather write my own stuff if I'm going to rechannel my creativity towards that, even though I'm much less confident that I'm good at it. Do you know what I mean? So it's like the thing you've done all your life, you sort of know eventually, I can act, I know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think you can write as well. I mean, this is all written in sort of Shakespearean English.
Yes, no, I did enjoy writing that, yes.
It's so easy to read. It's so wonderful.
Great,
do you want to read this extract from The Witch's Rap, or as it's called here, Reclaiming the O word?
Sure.
O for old, I guess.
Yes, O for old. My publisher wanted me to write The Three Witches. Sometimes I ran out of who I was writing for, and she said, I would like you to do Desdemona, I'd like you to do The Three Witches. And I thought, what can I say about The Three Witches? Because we never know what to do with them in the play, because because we don't believe in those kind of witches anymore that Shakespeare did believe in. So who are they? And they took over, because in my brain I woke up one morning, which happened with a lot of them. I'd wake up one morning with a rhythm in my head, and I just had this rhythm, double, double, toil and trouble, da-da. And so it came out as whiskers, wrinkles, bags that wobble, hags in rags with legs that hobble, chins a double, pricked with stubble, brains befuddled, minds a muddle, living in our babbling bubble, blamed for every trial and trouble, when all we are is old. With slimy noses, grimy toeses, where the thorns in lovely roses, the door of hope that quickly closes, where prose, while poetry that flows, is damned by us. What our kind knows is every lovely thing that grows is destined to grow old.
Wow. So what are the good things about getting older? Well, we've said a bit... serenity, I suppose. No, that's the golden fleece for you, isn't it?
I'm getting better at it. And I think people say this, but the simplest things about life, fresh air, nature, music, friendship, just sort of feeling the sun on your back in the spring. I mean, those sorts of things become, you think, God, I've got to grab all that and bottle it, because that's what you really enjoy. And I think sort of getting out of your head somehow, because there's a lot of noise and conversation in your head going on. And I think generally, since COVID maybe, when we all got sort of locked away, there's been an impulse to open up and talk to the person sitting next to you in the cafe, and ask the person sitting next to you in the theatre what brings them there, and
hunger for connection.
Hearing people's stories and not being frightened of other people somehow.
Well, you say that, but half the world is having mental problems because they don't know how to. The younger generations don't know.
I think that's probably why I think it's so important, really, but I don't know how to pass that on.
Are you mentoring? I know you said last time, actually, that you really believed in mentorship.
Yes, I do, but it's a light-touched mentorship. I'm not terribly in my comfort zone teaching, but I think leading or teaching, all those words are not they weren't part, again, by habit, how I've ever perceived myself. I've never perceived of myself as a leader. I've always been the follower, not the teacher, but the learner. And so somehow accommodating those ideas as sort of almost a new persona, a new adventure, recognizing that you have got something to hand on, and sort of I'm open to it if people ask, and they do. I've got plenty of young people who ask me for advice and things like that, but I wouldn't kind of put myself onto anybody, I don't think, because I don't think I've got the answer to life at all. I think I'm rather the opposite. I think I'm more confused than I ever was. But I do think that there's room for everybody in the world, and I don't think we should hive off certain people and ostracize people. I think we should all be included, and however opposite we are, however much we disagree, I think looking for what we have in common is on an everyday level. I walk through the streets of London and I say, what have I got in common with these people?
It's very good.
Not the other way around, because it's so easy to see what you haven't got in common.
It's true. And, when you travel around the world, you realise that everyone is the same. Everyone loves their children generally. People are generally kind. Sometimes they're not. But yes, it's more the similarity of humanity.
I think what you've just said is really important. I've been to some big talks where people who are very wise and write books and things. That's been a common thread, that most people want to live in peace with their fellow man and woman and be kind to one another and just get on with it. Most people don't want to get into armed combat or physical violence or wars. Yeah. And we get sort of shoved into that by some vested interests, but we mustn't be conned into thinking that the world is full of hostile people who want to hate one another. There are those elements, and they're being really flamed at the moment.
They are, yes.
But I still believe the vast majority of people just
enjoy the sun on their face
exactly.
and taste of a tomato.
So. Exactly.
I agree with you, and I want to raise my glass to that. I also want to. I'm wondering, you are musical, aren't you? Because the way you write that, and you have a sort of metronome in your head.
Yes, there is a musical ear in there.
Yes. And you are you still playing the piano?
Yes, but listen, when I say playing the piano, I mean, the only person who hears me is my husband, and he would laugh at the idea that I actually call myself a pianist. I don't call myself a pianist. It is one of my pleasures.
So is that how you relax?
Yes, jigsaw puzzles and pianos. And crosswords. Yeah.
And walking.
Mm-hmm.
And a bit of Pilates once or twice.
Yes.
And your husband is a newish husband, isn't he?
Well, yes, he is newish, although it's the longest relationship I've ever had.
You married him when you were 60, which is
That's right. That's right. And yes, it was great because on a daily basis, I notice how totally different we are. And yet how many things we've got in common. And so that teaches you a certain kind of expansiveness, on a daily basis. You say, well, I don't like the way he does that, but I love the way he does that. And I'm glad he's there and I wish he wasn't. And, all those things. And you just accommodate all the contradictions of two strong-willed individuals being in the same house together. It's a bonkers idea, really, a man and a woman living alone together. But I know why it works, and I know when it doesn't work that I don't get too worried. It'll blow over in a couple of hours, and it's a bit of a life lesson every day, really.
Do you think you were a slow developer? Because you've often said that you had a childish voice, so you even when you were 40, you sounded like an 18-year-old or
yes, yes, and I think people do treat you. I'm very aware. I'm at the front line, as it were, of how perception affects you. In the sense that I'm an actor, and you have to be aware of how I sound and how I look for a living. That's what I have to do. So even though I might not like any of it, or I might need to change it very much for a different part, I have to be aware of where I start from and whether I like it or not. Oh, that's the way so-and-so perceives me. That's the way I get cast. So I spend a lot of time trying to break those moulds and defy those moulds. But at the same time, I was treated like a little girl for much longer than I was a little girl.
Was that incredibly irritating? Did they?
No, I felt perfectly at home with it and rather liked it. And, that's the trouble. It's only really at this time that I'm saying, come on, Harriet, you are now Peggy Ashcroft to you, what she was to you.
But in your core, you're not, maybe. In your core,
no, but then nor was she. She was probably feeling, I'm 30 and I'd like to be friends with Harriet, who's also 30.
Yeah, that's great.
And you sort of realise that it's sort of nonsense in some ways. You've just lived longer and got a bit more experience. But I'm more confused than I was when I was younger, I think, because I haven't got the answers. But
maybe life's more confusing than it was 40 years ago or 30 years. I don't know.
Well, I think we've broken open so many things, and we've got to sort of find a place for them, and we don't quite know how to accommodate all these.
Time,
yes,
aren't we?
yes.
Things are changing. The old orders are changing, disappearing.
I think what I feel is that I absolutely cannot think where we'll be in 10, 20, 50 years' time, because there are so many branches that we could follow. I don't know whether we're going to destroy the planet. I don't know whether we're going to go very far right and become a dictatorship, or whether the whole world will sort of go into rebellion and resistance against what's going on and try and find a new channel. Or I just to sort of try and imagine the future. Whereas I think my parents probably could vaguely say, oh, well, the world will carry on the way it's been carrying on.
Right.
There'll be some odd new inventions like the mobile phone, but it won't be that different.
Do you get offered a lot of dystopian roles? Is there a lot of dystopian cinema?
There are. I'm doing a program. I've been doing it for 3 years. A thing called Silo, which is Apple TV, and it's set in 300 years' time, and we're all living underground in these silos that go down deep into the earth, and it's very hierarchical, and there are people at the top and the people at the bottom, and it's sort of 1984-ish. It's sort of Animal Farm-ish. I think those ideas have been with us for a while, ever since mechanization, ever since the threat of the bomb, and probably way before that. H.G. Wells and people were thinking of, strange futures. But I look at what we're doing and it's entertaining and it's interesting, but it's one of several strands we might end up following. I don't know that it's... Do
you succumb to nostalgia as a sort of antidote?
I do. I sort of long for the days when we didn't feel watched, and for the days when we didn't have Muzak in the lift, and for the days when you could talk to a human being and not have to press 3, 4 or 5 on your phone. I do long for those days. Yeah, that idea of always being... I'm very aware that everything here we are, we're being listened to, or my emails go out and I'm slightly going, who might be reading this email? Do you know what I mean? Sort of slightly self-censoring all the time.
Are you on social media?
No. And even without that, I still feel rather possibly watched or intruded on.
And you're saying that this idea of foreshortened time. So I'm not going to ask you what you want to do next, because that's irrelevant. So what are you going to do today? Do you live more in the present?
That's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. I stare into space and I go, am I staring into the future or am I staring into the past? I'm not quite sure.
Yes.
I'm probably staring into the near future. I spend a lot of time in the near future. I look at my diary a day before the day that I'm doing something and go, oh, that's what I'm doing tomorrow, because every day is very different. There's no routine.
But maybe because you're such a driven person, you've just learnt stillness if you're just sitting there looking into the nether distance.
I'm at the very beginning of learning stillness. I've got a long way to go. I get very twitchy. I think there are just too many things I'm curious about still. And I sort of jump up and down and go, well, what about that book? Oh, let me look that up. And, I've got to ring that friend. And, actually, it's sunny outside. Let's go out. All these things are going bang, bang, bang in my head.
Which is wonderful, because you're engaged in life. And, well, here's to that, and long may that go on, Harriet. It's been so wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. If you've enjoyed it, do explore more episodes of The Third Act, either in your favourite podcast app or by searching for The Third Act podcast on Google. And if there's someone you think would enjoy what you've heard today, please do let them know about the show. This episode was produced by Pete Norton and made possible by Auriens, the gold standard in later living. I'm Catherine Fairweather, and you've been listening to The Third Act.